Welcome to Fortune Forecast. You are in my book playlist and I am Daisy, your hostess. Thank you for joining me today as we continue through the pages of the book titled How to Unlock Your Subconscious Mind Through the Science of Mental Analysis. The authors are Elsie, Lincoln Benedict, and Ralph Payne Benedict. It was published in 1921 and it is in the public domain. Hopefully you have enjoyed that first intro. My takeaway, I'm going to keep it brief, could be all put in one sentence. Your life today is the net result of your yesterdays. And again, this author also mentioned about the laws that rule man. And I'm going to be bringing a whole segment on that. But for now, let's get into this next chapter. So if you're new to my channel, welcome, and to our Fortune family, thank you so much for joining me on this adventure. This next section starts off with a poem from William Carruth. Like tides on a crescent sea beach when the moon is new and thin, to the lonely heart strange longings come swelling and surging in. Come from the mystic ocean, whose rim no foot has trod. Some of us call it longing, but others call it God. Lesson 1. How our dreams reveal us. The secret of every dream. A secret lies back of every dream and everything that happens in a dream. Though science has but recently discovered that secret, this discovery is so far-reaching and fundamental that already it has cleared up some of the deepest mysteries of human personality, aided in the curing of all manner of physical diseases, mental disorders, and heretofore inexplicable ailments. The new insight it has given into the psychology of every human being, and especially into his deepest desires, has revolutionized the procedure of physicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, and all whose work it is to help humanity straighten out its tangles. This startling but strikingly scientific secret of the origin and meaning of dreams is that every dream is the fulfillment of one or more wishes that have been thwarted in our waking life. Dreams tell desires. In other words, everything you have or do or say or experience in a dream is the expression of some desire, longing, craving, yearning, or wish which has been cheated of expression or repressed during the daytime. One looking into your own dreams will prove to you that this is true. You will recall how many times you have been doing in your dreams what actuality prevented your doing, how your dreams contain so many more of the desired elements than does real life, and how much more intense are your dream experiences than those of reality. The poor who go to bed hungry or those who are dieting against their will dream of feasts and banquets where there are quantities of just the food they like best. The man who retires thirsty dreams of cool springs, babbling brooks, steins of beer, goblets of wine, pitchers of ice water, or whatever kind of beverage he prefers. A young woman friend who homesteaded a dry farm in Montana told us that over and over again, when she was most longing for it, she dreamed of finding a beautiful deep spring on her land. An intense repressed desire of any kind ultimately expresses itself in some form in our dreams. We dream of doing things we do not countenance in our waking thoughts, but we dream them because subconsciously we desire to do the thing or the thing it symbolizes. In many instances, the conscious mind is not aware of this desire at all. If it is, pushes it into the background for moral, ethical, or other reasons. No one should be blamed or criticized for the evil or immoral things he does in dreams. The fact that he dreams of doing them proves that he does not do them in his waking life. Any desire that is fully gratified during the daytime is satisfied. It gets out of the system. It is only those we are prevented from getting out our chest in the day that we dream of at night. Your two lives. You live two lives, outer and inner. The outer one consists of what you say and do, the inner of what you think and wish. The world witnesses much of your surface life and decides from it that you are a certain kind of person. But you know, with poignant sadness, how little anyone knows of the real you. You have 1,000 thoughts, desires, ambitions, and longings no one has ever dreamed you possessed. You have some faults too that they would be rather surprised to see. But you have beautiful ideals, sympathies for the sufferings of others, many generous impulses, and big hopes of helping humanity, which no one suspects and which you feel no one would understand, regardless of how hard you tried to explain them. The parts you play. One of these lives in your surface life, the other your submerged life. Each has its own consciousness, its own experiences, and operates in its own way. All the world's a stage, said Shakespeare, and all of us are actors and play many roles. The 10th part of your mind, which controls and handles your surface life, is, as stated, the conscious mind. It is at the helm during your waking hours. It directs the role you play in the many-act drama in which you appear day by day on the stage of your hourly existence. The part you play out here on the stage of this everyday conscious life is a part that has to conform to appearances. You say certain lines, you do certain things, you act a certain way because the exigencies of life, the amenities, and the world in general demand it. These compel you to do a great many things you do not like to do under any conditions. In your social relationships, in your work, in your business, in your duties as a citizen, parent, friend, and as a member of society. The surface you, accompanied by the conscious 10th of your mind, is forced to go through these parts all the time you are awake. Psychology of dreams. When you lose consciousness, out comes the other 9/10 of your mind, the submerged you, and takes charge of the stage. In a flash, he clears away the trappings of that sordid, humdrum play called every day, and instantly up goes the curtain on the perfect, the ideal, the longed-for dreams of what I want. This is the dream and the stuff of which it is made. In it all is as you desire. You are the star of the cast, the envied, the influential, the handsome, the powerful, the all-important personage around which everything else revolves. Your real self, halted, hampered, and hurt during the hours of consciousness, is now strong and free and favored in these hours when only subconscious reigns. The dream doings. In your dreams, you are always different from the person you are during the day. Instead of being at the mercy of reality, as you are in your waking hours, you begin to play some role you want to play, to act a part you want to act, to be some person you want to be, regardless of how fantastical these desires may be. Primitive nature of dreams. In the dream, there are no laws, no rules, no regulations, no inhibitions. The dreamer harks back 1,000,000 years before any of these restraints came to repress and civilize the intense, instinctive self of man, to that ancient stage of human development when every creature was free to do as he pleased, in just the degree that he was able to vanquish his enemies. This fact explains why we fight so hard in our dreams for what we desire, and why the action is so much more crude than during our waking life. The conventional self which dominates us during the day gives way, at night, to the primitive self which brooks no opposition, knows no defeat, has no scruples, no morals, no conventionalities, nothing but desires and their doings. We dream in pictures. Because the dream takes us back to the ancient stages when the keenest sense of men possessed was the visual one, our dreams are mostly purely visual experiences. The senses of hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling, all which figure prominently in our conscious life, are relegated to the rear in dreams because these were less acutely developed than sight in primitive man. Only those of the keenest auditory sense or gifted in music ever hear sounds in dreams. Only those whose gustatory senses are most highly developed ever taste things in dreams. Only those with the keenest of noses ever smell anything in a dream. Next in acuteness in the sense of sight is that of touch, and this figures frequently in dreams. For the most part, we dream in mental pictures. The average dream is but a series of visual images, a moving picture in which we play the leading role which exists around and through and for our personal selves. Difficulties in dreams. In dreams, the mind places obstacles in our pathway for the joy the ego experiences in demolishing them. And this is especially true of the dreams of Americans who, more than any other people, measure a man's success by the difficulties he has overcome. This conclusion is based in our analysis of hundreds of individuals from almost every civilized country. The opera star's story. In California, we recently conversed on the subject of the ego in dreams with an operatic star whose name is famous the world over. So famous that she was at the time traveling incognito to avoid the homage of multitude and have a few days of rest and quiet. She told us a dream she had had the night before. Here it is in her own words. I was always intensely desirous of fame. Even as a child, I knew I must be a great singer or life would not be worth living. I constantly pictured myself as a famous opera star, a silly performance for an unattractive little girl whose parents were as poverty-stricken as mine. As the eldest of a large family of children, I was responsible for little brothers and sisters who were constantly getting into the kinds of troubles that demanded my attention. This often irritated me beyond endurance and made me more incensed than anything in the world except one. Our parents owned a small chicken farm, and when I was not having to leave my daydreams, fairy books, and personal pursuits to care for babies, I was being compelled to look after the chickens. See that they were let out occasionally, but kept away from the garden. I hated hurting those chickens with all the blind hate of childhood. I felt humiliated every time I had to look after them. Was that any business for a future star to be in? I used to think to myself. That was 25 years ago. Last week, I came to this little inn and registered under another name without letting anyone know who I was. No one suspected. The result was that I, who have been accustomed to homage and special attention everywhere, was treated like the Miss Average American I was supposed to be. No favors of any kind. In fact, quite the opposite. They gave me a north room when I had specified a southern exposure. The girl at the newsstand was flippant, a bellhop was insolent, and all around I suffered from inferior service. The kind most everybody gets these days, but which I have been spared for several years because wherever I went, they knew who I was. I suppose, in fact, I admit, that all this irritated me. It humiliated and exasperated me. I could not get it off my mind. Had it not been for my intense desire to have a week of complete seclusion, I would have told them who I was at once. As it was, I decided I would do so as I was leaving, just in time to get even with everybody. I went to sleep in that humiliated frame of mind, and this is what I dreamed. The flippant newsstand girl, accompanied by the bellboy who had been insolent, came to my door and told me to come down to the backyard. They rather ordered than invited me to come. I resented it, but I felt I must be as dignified as possible. When we reached the backyard, it looked exactly like that backyard we had at home 25 years ago. There was the one scrubby tree, the weeds and stones and general sordidness I remember so well as characterizing that rear lot of ours. These two pointed out to me a large flock of chickens running loose and told me that though it was their task to keep them out of the garden, they were going to a concert that afternoon and I must do it in their place. I bitterly resented this, especially their thinking I was such a non-entity as that. But the final insult came just as they were leaving. "Here are the twins," they said, handing me over two soiled, squalling, squirming babies. I did not seem able to resist nor put into words my unutterable fury at this procedure, and before I could do anything, they were gone. I had a very interesting book and sat down to read, only to be incessantly interrupted by the babies getting into a nearby ditch and the chickens picking at the lettuce. For a while, I tried to carry out my orders, then I decided I would show them. When they returned, the chickens had eaten up all the garden, and the babies were wallowing in the water, completely covered with mud, their dresses hopelessly ruined. They rushed in, exclaiming that the concert was a great disappointment, the star had not appeared. Then they spied the babies and the chickens and began to scold me. I let them say just enough to get themselves in deep. Then I pointed to the western sky, which had by then darkened, in which the evening star was just visible. There they saw, blazing across the firmament and illuminating the whole world, my name in letters of flame, millions of miles high. They gasped and exclaimed, "Why, that's the name of the star who didn't appear this afternoon." Whereupon I explained very modestly, "Even a star can't be in two places simultaneously, and I was here, you see." Then, as the horror of the thing they had done come over them and they began to apologize, I haughtily lifted my skirts away from them and their muddy babies and sailed off, leaving them utterly crushed and bitterly bewailing the fact that they had missed this chance with the world-famous star they adored. Explanation of her dream. This dream is so obvious it scarcely requires explanation. Nevertheless, it is interesting to note how true to form it runs and how it illustrates almost every phase and element of dreams. To begin with, the opera star's dream has the clarity, vividness, and intensity which characterizes most of the dreams of successful people. Any individual who is getting from everyday life so much satisfaction fame and fortune, as this illustrious woman, does not think in the double symbols which are forced upon the unsuccessful or disappointed. Things as they are being highly gratifying to her, this woman thinks in terms of things as they are, with little subterfuge, pretense, or symbolization. The star's ego had been wounded by the newsstand girl and the bellhop, and she reasoned thus to herself, they would treat me very differently and differentially if they dreamed who I was. So in her dream, these two unappreciative people, whom she supposes know of and adore the person she really is and would give anything to associate with her personally, are reduced to utter humiliation, and she triumphs gloriously. All the ignominy she permits herself to suffer tending the chickens and the twins is endured for the sole purpose of thoroughly humiliating those two people who snubbed her during the day. You note how she didn't really tend the garden or the babies very long, but got her revenge even before the parents returned, by letting the babies ruin their dresses and the chickens ruin the garden. In her dream, she achieved complete revenge, even to the sailing off with her skirts held away from them as she would like to do in the hotel lobby. The babies and the chicken tending were old images stored away in her subconscious from childhood, and used in this dream as symbolizing the extreme humiliation which she felt when ignored and insulted by the girl and the bellhop. Her name, lighting up the entire sky in the letters of fire, is the one mental image which above all others would symbolize fame in the mind of one who has always been ambitious. The evening star was a very obvious symbol of herself, the star, closely connected with the famous and shining name, blazing there in the firmament for all the world to see. This dream differs from the average dream in that it was exceedingly long and at the same time coherent and integrated from beginning to end. There were no missing links, no disjointed parts. The entire experience was vivid, coordinated, with every part fitting into place like a mosaic into a pattern. I often remember snatches of dreams, she said, and fleeting dream experiences that do not appear to belong anywhere. But this one was as definite and dramatic as a play, with nothing extraneous, nothing isolated. It was more clear, in fact, than almost any actual experience I ever had. This latter fact is often true of our dreams, and for two excellent reasons. The first is that the dream is the product of the subconscious, which constitutes 9/10 of the mind and is 9 times more powerful. The second is that in dreams, our attention is not diverted by irrelevant or marginal things such as distract us during waking hours, but is concentrated exclusively on the dream. You will recall how in dreams you are never interrupted by other people's taking the stage and are never aware of any time, place, or condition other than those of your dream. Dreams and day events. My dreams seem to be nothing but leftovers from the day's experiences, says many a one, and this, at first glance, seems to be the only tangible significance of most of our dreams. But that there is a far deeper meaning you may see for yourself by noting that though many a dream begins with some event of the day, it never sticks to the facts as of the original occurrence, but branches off into other directions, injecting all manners of new details which are in themselves irrelevant. In every instance, you will note that the dream is built around a recent event which was in some way a disappointment to you. In the dream, you go back and make changes to suit your subconscious self. You live over certain elements of the experience or live over up to a certain point. From that point onward, instead of adhering to what actually happened, the dream carries out what you wish had happened. Dreams that mystify us. And now we come to one of the most interesting things about dreams: their symbolism. As you have read this lesson, perhaps you have been thinking, but how can my dreams come from my desires? Why, I have often had dreams in which I did things I didn't like and experienced all manner of things I didn't desire. This apparently paradoxical condition delayed for many centuries science unraveling of the real meaning of our dreams. Then, a few years ago, there was discovered the most significant fact of all: that we dream not only in pictures, but that those pictures are full of symbols. In other words, the subconscious, which is in control of our dreams, is full of symbols, each of which represents, in the mind of the individual, something very definite. This symbol stands for this definite something because of its having been connected with some experience of the individual's life, usually in his childhood, in such a way as to fasten it into his subconscious mind. There are several reasons for this. The chief one being that the subconscious is not a reasoning but a feeling, knowing mind. It simplifies all things, reduces them to their lowest common denominator. So when the individual passes through some especially vivid experience, it is filed away in the memory, not as a detailed, minutely recorded thing like a page of statistics, but as a highly colored picture. In every case, the picture will relate to whichever element was experienced at the moment of the highest pitch of emotion. This emotional element is what makes any experience vivid in memory. More will be explained concerning these pictures and their far-reaching effect upon the individual's life in the next lesson. But for the present, it is sufficient to know that your mind has automatically been filing away these symbols ever since you were born, and that very early in life you acquired one for almost every kind of thought, feeling, or group of thoughts and sensations you experienced. Dreams, being almost exclusively in pictures staged by the subconscious, deal in wholesale fashion with those old mental pictures of yours. Your mental morgue. The best illustration of how the subconscious mind utilizes old symbols in the making of new dreams is seen every day in the office of big city newspapers. Every newspaper has filed away, numbered and indexed every picture it has printed in previous issues. This department is known fittingly, though uncannily, as the morgue. These pictures correspond to the pictures you unconsciously filed away in your subconscious as symbolizing your previous experiences. That your subconscious, like the newspaper's office, files these away at the time and then forgets them till they're needed again, makes the analogy a perfect one. There are thousands of these old pictures, photos, illustrations, cartoons, and diagrams stowed in the newspaper's morgue. The keeper of the morgue remembers only the merest fraction of them. But when a striking thing happens, when something breaks, as the newspaper world says, the morgue is called upon for any pictures which can be utilized to illustrate the story in that day's issue. This accounts for the fact that you sometimes see ancient photos with hats, coiffures, and clothes that have been out of style for 20 years, used in connection with new stories. The editor used these only for lack of newer ones. New pictures of private individuals are not easily secured by newspapers, just as new symbols are not easily acquired by your subconscious mind, and as the newspaper is compelled to use pictures, symbols, representing an individual as he appeared at some function or affair 20 or 30 years ago. So the subconscious digs up and uses in our dreams old symbols, which stand for experiences, thoughts, and emotions, which we experienced many years ago. Your conscious mind may be likened to the city editor who keeps in momentary touch with everything happening around him. Your subconscious acts and reacts precisely as does the keeper of the newspaper's pictured gallery. It takes no more notice of what is passing in your immediate surroundings, moment by moment, than the morgue keeper takes of the news happening in the great city. That isn't his job. But when anything exciting or interesting, and especially when something highly dramatic or sensational happens in your everyday life, either as a desire or an actual experience, the city editor of your conscious mind reports it to the keeper of your old subconscious picture gallery, and he furnishes the illustrations for the picturesque edition that floats before your mind in the form of dreams that night. Every dream gets its original impulse from some recent personal experience or desire which hinges on something that has just previously happened or been hoped for, as does every story or article printed in the daily paper. By 10 o'clock in the morning, the dreams of the night before are as out of date and forgotten as is the newspaper of the day before. The conscious mind is busy, just as is the city editor, with the problems of the present, getting ready to print a new edition. When the dream edition prints in your mind's eye that night will depend on which of the day's experiences have most intimately and emotionally affected the ego or your subconscious wishes. This accounts for the fact that we dream many dreams during each night, some related and some unrelated to each other. Though many people do not recall their dreams the next day, no one has yet been found who, when suddenly awakened, was not in the midst of some sort of dream. He may forget it an instant afterward, but he will have at least some slight realization on the instant of waking that he was having some kind of dream sensation. Dreaming what you do not want. When you dream of having things or doing things you dislike or are indifferent to, that is, whenever the desire is not apparent in a dream, think back through your experiences and see if you cannot recall what the dream pictures symbolize in the back of your mind. For the following law operates in every dream. Law of symbols. When a dream contains elements which are, so far as we know, undesired by the conscious mind, these elements are symbolic of something which is deeply desired either by the conscious or subconscious mind, and usually by both. Nightmares are merely dreams containing desires whose symbols are not pleasant ones, and in which the action, which is also symbolic, becomes so intense it awakens the conscious mind from sleep. The nurse's dream. A case illustrating the use of symbols in staging subconscious wishes in dreams came under our notice several years ago. A nurse of high standing in the city of San Francisco wished to have analyzed the following dream, which had recurred until it had become an obsession. She said, "The hospital has an insufficient staff of nurses, so I am busy all day and part of the night. This has continued for many months, and I'm getting so worn out physically that unless I am able to free myself of the distracting dream, which often awakens me with its horror, I shall have to resign. Every time I fall asleep, if only for a moment, I have this dream. I am standing at the foot of a bed in the ward, where, of course, I have witnessed many deaths. The white screen, which we always place around a cot in the last moments, looms up in this dream as clearly as it does in my waking hours. But instead of a stranger, it is one of the former hospital doctors who lies there dying. I see his agony and the death struggle, his appeal to me to save him. But just as I try to do something, the dream ends, soon to begin all over again. The full understanding of her dream so clarified the subconscious of this young woman that in 4 days it ceased to recur, a recovery much more rapid than is possible in most cases. Her frankness, sincerity, and previous scientific training added to the fact that the dream was easily analyzed according to symbols, made the cure a simple one. The nurse's dream explained. The deathbed had become, unconsciously, a very significant symbol in the nurse's mind. The symbol of something she deeply desired. She had, despite valiant efforts to the contrary, and despite the fact that she would not admit to herself, fallen in love with one of the hospital physicians who was already married. Some months prior to her coming to us, this physician had resigned from the hospital board and had moved to another city. The last time she had seen him was when they officiated jointly at a deathbed scene in the ward. She had lived this last moment with him over so vividly, had recalled the emotions with which she had been torn at the time, knowing, as she did, that he was leaving, that it became fixed in the subconscious as a symbol of his presence. Subconsciously, she had longed to have the wife's place, to minister to him, endear herself to him, and be able to do something very great for him, something that would make him care. To save man's life is the surest, quickest route into his gratitude and affection. So the subconscious devised this little drama. When she met her situation frankly, and when she realized that the dream came from her own mind and was not, as she had feared, a premonition of the impending death of the doctor, the condition cleared immediately. The speaker's dream. A dream composed entirely of symbols recurred to a woman on an average of 2 or 3 nights a week for over 25 years. She said, "In this dream, I am laboriously climbing over huge boulders, deep ravines, and tremendous crags in my effort to reach the top of a high mountain whose sides are almost perpendicular. Far down below, straight down below in the bottom of the canyon, there dashes over the rocks a mad, rushing, foaming river. I am constantly on the lookout to prevent myself from falling, for I know I would be mangled to death long before I reach the bottom, if I should lose my footing. Now, the strange part of this is that I am never really frightened by this great height, nor actually in danger of falling, for I am wearing thick-soled, heavy mountain shoes which enable me to secure a sure and solid footing. Though I can never climb as rapidly as I desire, I am always making good progress. Another strange thing in this dream is that I always have one boon companion, William Jennings Bryan. He walks by my side, though he never takes hold of my hand nor offers to help me, but he is extremely courteous, and we chat pleasantly in the most simple, friendly way as we climb upward. A great many people are in our party, but Mr. Bryan and I seem to be finding the path by which they are to climb. Every little while we lean over the precipice and call down to them. They make headway, and some of them climb very fast. These seem happy and exceedingly grateful to us for showing them the way and blazing the trail. In this dream, Mr. Bryan and I are very simply clothed, he in an old-fashioned suit, and I in a durable brown serge. Mr. Bryan carries in his right hand exactly 16 different kinds of flowers, columbines, brown-eyed Susans, and other wildflowers, while my arms seem to be loaded with those dark red blooms called bleeding hearts. Explanation of the dream. This dream, so symbolical from beginning to end, is crystal clear when the woman's supreme subconscious wish plus her childhood experiences are made known. She had grown up in the wildest part of the Rocky Mountains, and mountains became to her the symbols of the heights to which her ambition pointed. This ambition was to be a great orator, an orator like Bryan, whom she had first heard of when he ran for president in 1896. Mr. Bryan became to her the symbol of her oratorical ambition. Having lived all her life in the fastnesses of the mountains, this young woman's symbols all bore the marks of her early environment. This accounted for the fact that though she was a woman of middle age when she told her dream and had for many years lived exclusively in great cities, the symbols in the dream had never changed. Neither did the dream elements alter so much as a hair's breadth, and the reason for this, too, is obvious. Her ambition, her supreme subconscious wish, had never changed. From her youth, she had desired one thing above all others: to be a great speaker. And though she desired it so much that she became a well-known lecturer, she still dreamed the dream because she had never reached the complete fulfillment of her ambition. She came, in years, to have audiences which filled the largest auditoriums, but she had other ambitions than speaking to great crowds, though this element was naturally always present in her desires. That Mr. Bryan carried 16 kinds of flowers to one was amusingly symbolical of Bryan's first slogan, quote unquote, 16 to 1. The most significant symbol in this dream is that of the bleeding heart flowers that loaded down her arms. She grew up in poverty, and her youth was black with those hardships known only to pioneer and especially mountain pioneer regions. At an early age, she came to sympathize with all the poor and struggling because of her own struggles and poverty, and to think of their broken hearts in the terms of the bleeding heart flowers that grew on the mountains near her home. She longed to help these others who were poor and ambitious up the heights along with herself, and wanted to do it through oratory, the simple, sincere kind Bryan used. In all her dreams, even after she came to realize this ambition in great measure, she dreamed the same thing over and over because she was still struggling, still climbing, still trying to go higher and take more people. Sometimes their burdens seemed to load her down, as did the flowers they symbolized. But always they made progress, and always she was confident she would not fall into the canyon symbolizing failure because she wore mountain shoes and planted her feet solidly on the ground. They were symbolic also of her certainty that she stood on solid scientific ground, that she had grounded herself in what she was teaching, that she had a good foundation for what she was doing. Her plain brown serge symbolized the simplicity which the woman had always held as an ideal. This dream is more pleasant than otherwise, containing just enough of the struggle element to stimulate the courage and test the ambition, so she has never tried to be rid of it, and indeed is better for having her greatest ambitions and ideals run off in this dream movie to keep her reminded that the top has not yet been reached. And this concludes Lesson 1. All right, dear one. Before we go on to the next lesson, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll meet you at the next video.